We in Africa are not allowed to speak our language in our school systems.
Yeah, it's predominantly English. Or
You
it's
got to
English.
speak.
Haven't they switched it?
You
Yeah.
got to speak English or you're dumb.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel. It's always great to have you here as usual. And in case you're coming across this channel for the first time, you're highly welcome and highly regarded. Please consider supporting this channel by subscribing to this channel for more interesting and compelling content, for more educative content uh, um, on topics like this and much more. And in today's episode, I want us to share a little knowledge on something I have always wanted to share, something that I have always had in my mind for a long time. And I felt that it's just good that we share this knowledge together. And I can also get to know your views, your opinions on the same matter, and and we learn together. So as you have an idea, as always, this channel is so much dedicated to really sharing a lot of knowledge and information about the empowering of the Black person, empowering of the African uh, continent and the African people. And in this video, we are going to talk about, Africa and language and Africa in a nutshell. I want us to, this is just in a series of videos that we have been doing about the decolonization of the African mind, because you get to realize that one way that the white person managed to um, subdue the African person or the Black person was actually imposing not only his cultures and his ways of life, but including, his own language. And I have a short video. I'm going to share with the video, with us the video. Let's watch this short video about the same, and then we can have a discussion and analysis of the same. So let's dive in and see you at the other side of the video.
We in Africa are not allowed to speak our language in our school systems.
Yeah, it's predominantly English. Or
You
it's
got to
English.
speak.
Haven't they switched it?
You
Yeah.
got to speak English or you're dumb. So because of this reason, no books brought on the continent are translated in our dialect. The only books that gets translated in our local palette is the religious books. It's only the religious book that has various versions in the African languages. In Yoruba, in Hausa, in the Bani, in the Gati. Psychologically, they are telling you the only book they need you to understand is the religious books, and that's it.
Exactly.
They systematically ensure that you only read the books that your saviors wrote for you in your direct language so you can fully understand the sayings of your savior. Question: why were the science books never translated in our local dialect? Across the African belt, you will never find a single school that has a science book in their own dialect. And you think about it, we know the herbs, right? But when they are writing books on herbs, they don't write it in our language. When you go to any other country, right, the Chinese have science books in Chinese, have math book in Chinese, have engineering books in Chinese. The Russians have all the school books in their language, right? The Swiss have their school books in their language. The French have the school books in their language. The Portuguese have the school books in their language, right? The Japanese have the Indonesians, the Indians, they all have their books in their language. But just the Black African, we don't have anything in our language. What is that telling you? They want you to ensure that you never learn outside religion.
To keep you doctrinated, keep you dumbed down, keep you suppressed, and keep you under their rule.
When you come to the continent and you go to all the churches, all the mega churches around the continent, right? Each pastor has got an interpreter, right? Who the main pastor is preaching English, right? And the interpreter in the church is translating what the pastor is saying into the local dialect so that the congregation would in detail hear exactly what the God of the Bible is saying.
Exactly. Yes, all right, exactly. School. Yeah.
They preach in English, but they translate it in our local dialect. When they are doing their crusades in our villages, they preach in English, they translate it in their local dialect. When they are everything about religion, when they are evangelizing, the white people, right, go to our villages to evangelize to them, and they have translators who will translate what the white people are saying. Okay, good.
Exactly.
They want to understand God's word. Okay. Why is it that when the African teacher is teaching in the schools, they don't have translators in the classroom translating what the teacher is saying in English so that everybody in the classroom could understand the science they are teaching?
Wow.
Why don't they have translations in the maths lectures? All our universities, right? It's sad. All our universities don't speak any of our local dialects in the universities. They don't teach in them. But you go to China, and before Chinese allow you into their countries, they say it's compulsory to learn what Mandarin, right? To learn their language. Before you can go and study. I have a nephew who went to study medicine in China, and they wouldn't give him a certificate until he passed the Chinese language. They wouldn't give him a certificate, but they don't care what he did. The holy how they're going to give you a certificate if you pass Mandarin. And I'm like, which of my ancestors spoke Chinese?
Right.
Why do I care about China and their language? Because the Chinese are getting it. They understood for you to colonize a people, you need to get their tongue. You need to change their tongue. Right? Yes, so the Chinese are employing the same system that the Europeans did. The Arabs, there's a thing we call makaranta, right? Which the local people in Ghana, when they go to the mosques, they are forced to learn the Arabic language. Forced on weekend classes, right? In my entire existence on the continent, I have never seen a school system that forced any child in our schools to learn any of our languages.
I have always had asking myself these questions so many times, that how comes they manage to translate the Bible into various African vernaculars, African languages, but not our science books and not our maths books, growing up in and going to school from the very, very tender age, of just starting school. You begin to learn either in English, and maybe those countries, that were that are Anglophone and do the English way. Francophone do go the French way, and the various languages of the colonizers. So how hard is it? And I have always asked myself, how hard is it to translate a science book into the same African language that they translated the Bible into? Is there something, because in Europe, for example, Europe has many countries and many languages, and in their school curriculums, they actually teach in their various European languages. They do not really have to impose English, across the entire continent of Europe, or French across, why is it that in Africa we use the language, we have national languages, we have official languages, and mostly the official language, the language of business, the language of the office, is usually the language of the colonizer, you know. And this is just part of what the black person has to see in terms of this is what it takes to decolonize the mind of a black person, you know. Decolonizing the African mind, or the a mind of a black person, involves, you know, addressing um, and challenging the lasting impacts of colonialism on African societies. You know, it seeks to reclaim and restore those very indigenous knowledge and cultural practices, and, you know, perspectives that were marginalized or suppressed under, you know, the colonial rule. And there's definitely a lot of work for us to do, you know. But when it comes to language itself, you know, and then I think the two most basic things that we have to really tackle is we have to really just go in the way of educational reforms, you know, revising of educational curriculums to include African history, African languages, and African contributions, rather than primarily just focusing on colonial narratives or colonial perspectives of Africa. And I don't have a problem with someone speaking many different languages, regardless of where the languages come from. I mean, that's empowerment in itself. But for as long as that is done willingly, not imposed, then it's fine. I have had white people speak in African languages. I have had white people speak in Swahili and other different African languages. That is okay for as long as you're doing it at your own personal will. Then it is okay for your own personal benefits, but not as an imposed, forced language that if you don't do it, then you're not going to go anywhere. Another thing we have to also look into as Africans trying to decolonize is promoting traditional cultural practices. And language is part of our cultural practice and customs that were really, I can confidently say, eroded by colonial influence. It's sad that even this video we have to do in the language of the colonizer, because that is how the system has been wired to work. But it doesn't matter. I believe we are going to use what we have at hand to get or to acquire what we don't have. So we will use their language to decolonize, to empower ourselves, to empower our own languages, to communicate with our own self. Because after all, you know, the white man's most successful tactic was the divide and rule, to make sure that, you know, things, beliefs, and practices that belong to us are eroded and deemed unfit for us, and those that come from them are the civilization, are the modernity, are those that are accepted, you know. It's sad that instead of us homogeneously coming together with solutions, or the white man thinking in a way that we come together and grow the world together, we have to impose our ideologies onto those of other people, and tell them narratives of how their own are not the best. are how their own practices are very backward, just because you don't agree with. Yeah, so decolonizing really aims to foster a sense of identity and agency, empowering individuals and communities to shape their futures in their own terms, I can say. That's really my view of what. And there are a lot of other factors that we'll talk about in other videos in terms of what really it takes to decolonize the African mind, such as historical reclamation, economic and social justice, so on and so forth. But maybe we have to start from somewhere, one thing at a time, one step at a time, one move at a time. We have to think about this topic of language in its own and in totality and in its entirety. Ask ourselves those hard questions. And I personally really believe and I love the awakening that's coming to the Black person, that's coming to Africa. And not everybody is really comfortable with this. Come to think about this, and Africa has so many enemies coming from left, right, and center, and others are coming in masks, or dressed in friendly form, but those are many forms of imperialism existing in its many different ways. After dealing with the imperialism of Europeans, or that came from Europe, an African person must always be on toes, because everybody else is looking at recolonizing, if that is the word, recolonizing the Black person, and colonizing Africa. Look at, for example, my friends that are of belonging to the Islam religion. They are forced at a younger age to learn Arabic. That's a way of colonization in its own. Look at the Chinese invasion, I can actually call it, the recent Chinese invasion of Africa. I have friends that went to China to learn maybe a course. Like, I have a friend who went to do engineering in China, but one requirement for him to learn to go to university was they have to be fluent. They have to be able to communicate in Chinese, in Mandarin. That's telling you that it doesn't really matter, like we've heard from that video. It doesn't matter what you're going to look for, but first things first, because the language is really core in a person's culture. It's what makes up a big majority of a people's culture. Yeah, so I think we can end this video here. Please do share your thoughts, your opinions on this in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel to support us and for more content like this. Until next time, see you in the next video.